Welcome to the Commercial Edge podcast with me, Chris Webber. Come and enjoy a virtual coffee while I share my experience and ideas that could help you overcome difficult people at work. I share my thinking and insights so that you can find new ways to overcome challenges and gain a commercial edge and unleash the power of people.
Section 4, difficult customers. Sales is everywhere and for everyone. When I talk about difficult customers, I frequently get a response from people saying that they don't have customers because they're not salespeople. But that really isn't true. Sales is everywhere and for everyone, regardless of your function and level in the business. It goes beyond work too. In our personal lives, we sell and influence others all the time. A few months after John Pendlebury told me that my career as a professional rugby league player for Wigan was over, I found myself sitting in the Gerard Arms in St Helens, nursing a pint of Greenall's beer and thinking about the future. The Gerard Arms was a 15-minute walk from where I grew up and was a place where I spent many happy evenings with friends. It was a traditional English pub with a crown green bowling green at the back, a bar and a lounge area. They didn't serve food, just beer and spirits. And it was a destination for locals to come together, chat, laugh, and share a bag of crisps. After I turned 18, my closest friends and I would walk to the pub, share several rounds of beer, and then go to the closest fish and chip shop to buy food for the walk home. I spent New Year's Eve there with my cousin, and another cousin worked behind the bar. I'm guessing that meant free drinks. It was also the place where my uncle brought me my very first legal beer in a pub. It was an important place and naturally a refuge I sought as I considered a new plan for the next 10 years of my life. I remember sitting in that lounge and looking at the people around me, trying to work out what I was going to do about the future. And then I suddenly had a realization. Sales are everything. I looked around the room and I saw that someone had sold everything. The furniture, the drinks behind the bar, the snacks, it went further. I had friends who worked in the building trade and others who worked as personal trainers. They were all selling. They needed to find new clients and they needed to close deals. Over the years, I have understood that humans love to buy things. Yes, we do. Vinted. Whenever I travel to new cities, I always focus on markets and local traders. Restaurants, cafes and bars need to attract customers. And all major holidays are anchored around the need to shop, gift, and organise events. The universal truth is that we love to buy things. This inspired me to realise that if I could sell, I could always find work and make money, because there's always the need to buy things and to sell. I went home and I started to research sales jobs, only to discover that a cousin who had already worked in the medical technology industry was already in sales. She was instrumental in guiding me towards a role in the pharmaceutical industry. She told me to buy great answers to tough interview questions and prepare for interviews. I already had science qualifications, and with some research and preparation, I felt able to secure my first proper job in sales. Several months later, I joined an initial training course for Bristol Myers Squibb as a contract salesperson, along with a team of others. That was the start of the second phase of my career in pharmaceutical sales, and I loved it. Over the years, I've been part of many teams, projects, and groups from many different companies, industries, and functions, and I have become ever more convinced that everyone needs to sell, and that is a fundamental life skill. An example of how I explain this to people I'm working with is to compare two different scenarios. I ask them to imagine trying to persuade colleagues to make a decision and try to influence that decision in their preferred way. How might you approach that conversation? What information would you gather and share? And what arguments would you use? Often the response is rather formal, using a slide presentation and evidence to support arguments. You might summarize it as a professional and polished set of arguments. I then ask a second question. How would you persuade some of your closest friends? And that answer is very different. How would you persuade some of your friends to attend an event at your favourite restaurant, for example? This answer is revealing and much more attuned to the type of influence strategies that we fail to embrace in a professional environment. They describe how they might speak with passion and enthusiasm. They explain the quality of the food, the professional service, and they can appeal to their friendships, creating leverage through flavors and favors. Crucially, they rely on trust as a key strategy. They understand that we can be influenced by people whom we trust, and we make decisions through emotion. These factors are most commonly used to influence our friends. There are no slide decks and very few pieces of data. It's all about the emotion. This contrast illustrates some critical points about the importance of sales. We are often natural salespeople. For some reason, we do not follow our instincts when we try to sell and influence in the workplace. The second point is that sales is not just about buyers and sellers. Sales involves influencing others to make choices based on our recommendations, and that occurs every day with colleagues, managers, team members, and of course, our customers. We need a certain level of trust to influence other people. When we have high levels of trust, it is easier to influence people, and that trust is earned over time. Trust, of course, is not black and white, on or off. It might exist in very small amounts indeed, and there are times when it's barely there at all. We have just enough to start a conversation and we immediately sense that it can grow and continue. Consider meeting someone in the street and asking them for directions. At the moment you speak, there is very little trust, and even this situation is why many of us are uncomfortable speaking with strangers on the street, because we simply don't trust them. But if you speak, you immediately try to understand if you trust this person enough to continue the conversation. Do they appear to be someone that I could trust enough to take advice from them? If not, you walk away and find someone else to ask. We will explore trust later and the elements that contribute to building trust commercially. However, it is a critical aspect, and frequently difficult people at work, and indeed difficult customers, are those with whom we struggle to build trust. In this section, we will explore difficult customers. Difficult customers can be anywhere that you are trying to influence, and you do not need to be in sales to recognize these problems. Customers can be other teams, departments, or functions. And difficult customers are those with whom this is not easy. We are all able to influence and sell, especially with people that we have great relationships with and we trust. Problems arise when we cannot connect on a personal level, making influence much harder. Yet we are still expected to be able to work together productively. A commercial edge comes to people who can work productively with people they naturally find difficult. And that is where the opportunity is.
There we go. Chris, come on in. So you've heard a little snippet there of what this book is all about, but now I think it's only fair. Well, I don't know if do we need these?
Not
You can hear us like this, right? Yeah, we don't need a microphone. It's more intimate like this, it's fine. So when you do the questions, then you can have the microphone. We've heard a little snippet there, but we want to find out, really, in your words, what is this book all about?
What is it about? I think it's about the people that I've worked with, and I often get a question from clients, colleagues, different people who say to me, how is it you do what you do? I know Jana's one of my biggest supporters, biggest fans, my partner, and she said to me one time that what you do is magic, and it always stuck with me, and it makes me think and reflect on why is it what is it that's magic about it? And because to me it feels like what I do is just normal, it's just natural, it just comes instinctively to me. And when I started to write the book, it was about me thinking about what are the things that other people are missing. What is it that when I go into a conversation with people, they don't get it, they don't see it, and I talk to them for half an hour and they say, wow, that's really powerful, that's really insightful. And so that's the book. It's the other person's point of view. That's what the book is about. The book is about the other person's point of view when you're going into a conversation.
Which is really interesting, actually, because I obviously have read through the whole thing. I've got a little insight before it was even released, which I felt very honoured to have. Pretty much I needed it, really, to be able to ask you these questions. Otherwise, it'd be pointless. But what I found really interesting is whether you're an employed member of society or self-employed, or you have your own company or whatever, self-employed like myself, it was so relatable. And was that something that you had in mind from the start, that no matter what path you're on in life, you wanted to make this book relatable to everyone?
It was the other way around. When I spent most of my sales career, majority of my sales career, in pharmaceuticals. And when I left pharmaceuticals, which was over 10 years ago now, I suddenly had an open world to all these different industries, some amazing places with people doing really brilliant things. But what I noticed was how samey it was. And then there's this realization that you're dealing with people, and wherever you're dealing with people, you have the same problems. And I think I annoy people at times when I simplify problems. I simplify their industry problems, and I sometimes oversimplify them. I recognize that, because it helps me to do the job that I'm trying to do. But I simplify it to the people and the personalities, the agendas, the pressures that people are under. And so part of the book was not to make it relatable. The book was always going to be relatable, because everybody you meet has an experience of dealing with somebody difficult. And that part of the reason is that this is based upon people that I've met, and the examples that existed in the book. As I started to write about these personalities, it was flooding my mind with, I remember that situation, I remember that person, and I'm not the only one who's experienced that. And so it is my life, but it's also everybody's life dealing with people.
And I think it's fair to say we've all dealt with some very difficult people, no matter what job you do. But you kind of mentioned that you had a few examples in there, and without giving too much away, there was a particular urologist who kind of triggered this whole thing off, really, it's fair to say. Tell everyone about that.
Yeah, so the start of the book is I think it's a poignant story for me, because I think it echoes a lot about how far I've come in the last 29 years. And it was, so I was a sales rep down in South Wales, and Nick's sitting in the audience. He's probably the only pharmaceutical guy I think who's, Jose as well. And my role was as a GP hospital sales rep. My job was to go and sell to doctors our medicines, and medicines go through a whole lot of science to when they come onto the market, and so every company always believes that their medicine is by far the best medicine in the world because we've researched it better than everybody else has. And I went to see this guy as a surgeon, and he didn't even want to talk to me, wouldn't even meet me.
Rude.
That's how I felt at the time. Yeah, and that was part of it. Like, he wouldn't even speak and wouldn't even engage, and I found that incredibly frustrating. And his answer was, the product I was selling at the time was a twice a day product, and we had a competitor product which was a once a day product, and he used that product. And he said, that's the one I use, and I have no interest. And the message that I got indirectly through his team and through his secretary was, we're not going to use it because it's a twice a day. So come back with the once a day. And I remember standing in his office one day and bumping into him, and that was exactly what he said. Come back when you've got a once a day. And then it happened. We went to a launch meeting where our product was going to become a once a day treatment. And I was like, that's it.
This is it.
I've got him. Yeah. Right? And I went to the office and I spoke to him, and he still wouldn't give me a meeting. And I said, you told me to come back to you when you've got a once a day. And he said, I don't care. And Good. He walked out of the office. And I was so furious.
I'm not surprised.
Because for me, I felt like, but that's the thing you asked for.
And I've done it.
And I've done it.
Yeah.
And the reason it stuck with me is I hear this so often from sales, and there's quite a few salespeople in this room, and I know that you'll relate to my customer has told me we need this. And so if I can provide this, then they're going to sign on the dotted line. But yet we all know of the concept of a false objection. And I guess I look at Graham Drew as well, who's in the audience here, and Graham's business is built around why customers don't buy from you, and really getting into the nitty-gritty of that. And the idea of this false objection, it's like they lied to me, and that's how I felt. He's lied to me. I brought that answer and whatever, and it's only with hindsight, 29 years worth of hindsight, I recognise that he really didn't care about that product. Because when I really reflect on it, and I guess we'll never know the answer because I'm certainly not going to ask him.
You say that, but the surprise that you don't know who's coming in the room that night.
But is that if I was in his position now, as a surgeon who spent, I don't know how long surgeons qualify for, decades, it's decades of work to become a surgeon. I don't think I would be interested in prescribing medicines. I want to be cutting people open and playing around with stuff.
Thank goodness you're not my surgeon.
Yeah, but that's what surgeons love doing. They love cutting
absolutely.
stuff around. Like anyone who's ever been to a surgeon and come out with them saying, you know what you don't need is an operation.
Yeah.
They don't. They go, yeah, I can fix that. Have you ever done this before? We'll work it out.
Yeah.
And so that's what his interest was. Now, of course, there's a protocol, which means I can't just cut people open. We've got medicines, I need to use the medicines. So he did what he needed to do, which was prescribe our drug. He probably didn't care which one it was. He wasn't overthinking it. This one's pretty good. There's no problem with it. They're all researched, they're all safe. I don't really care. And it wasn't about me, and it wasn't about the product, and it wasn't about that agenda. But in my mind, it was the biggest thing in the world.
That he was out to get you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is it that hindsight then, or would you say it's that experience that's then shaped your vision of business going forward, nearly 30 years on?
Yeah. It's that perspective and reflecting on that helps me to challenge my clients and the people I work with of what are they really thinking.
And what point was it that you realised that experience is what's going to shape the way that you look at business?
When I sat down to write a book on difficult people at work and difficult customers, the first name that comes into my mind is that guy. The first thing, because for me he was the epitome of a difficult customer. And I had an experience a few months ago with a client who had exactly the same challenge in the same industry with a customer they had in Scotland, and I gave them the advice that I wish I'd heard previously, and they got a very different outcome. Someone who'd been a blocker for them, they call them a blocker, for 4 years, decided that there was a space for them to use their particular product and treatment. And it came from me saying, let's flip it around. Let's see how they see the world. And then if we solve the problem from their perspective, then it's a much easier conversation.
And would you say ultimately then that is, for everyone here listening today, obviously read the book to find the true answer. But would you say it is a case of not so much looking at them, but looking at yourself?
Yeah. So I mean, the twist in the book is that, and I say it in there, that if you're reading the book because you want a clever answer that you can apply, that you can then say, how do I overcome this difficult customer, then you're going to be disappointed because what the book is about is empowering yourself to make the changes. The difficult customer probably says the same thing about you. I don't want to know what that guy said about me afterwards, And I was in my most open and brash way. And Joe Smith, who's sitting in the back, knows what Webby is like when gets in a mood. Yeah. And if anyone wants to hear some stories, you're going to speak to Joe later on tonight. He'll tell you the stories. And that's what he saw. And so his attitude towards me would have been really negative. And that's the point, is that a difficult person sees you as difficult too. It's not one way. It's not like they think you're amazing and you think, and they think you're amazing and you just find them difficult. That's not the way it works. So they find you equally difficult. But the problem is they aren't going to change, because as far as they're concerned, they're doing their job. And I say this, like, a micromanager on day one is a dream. You start your job, your boss is on top of you, telling you what you need to know, showing you where stuff is, checking your work is making the right progress, introducing you to the right people, following up, right? It's a dream on day one. In day 91 and 101 and 201, they're a nightmare.
Getting right on your nerves. Yeah, exactly.
But they're doing the same thing that they did on day one.
It's your outlook that's changed.
That's changed. And so they are not going to change the way that they're doing things. It's up to us to manage that differently. And that's the essence of the book, is understand how they feel, understand what they're thinking, understand their perspective. And I try and bring out the personality. I try and show you in the book what they're thinking. It's not just you need to work it out. I try and pull out some of the agendas. And there were many more personalities in here that I thought about including, but you want to limit it to a book that people can read, not.
And you knew a lot of them were coming tonight, so you didn't want to make it awkward.
Exactly,
right? But that was something that really stood out for me throughout the whole book, was that your point was, and you even said it in the book, that no one sets out to be difficult. And that's the thing that you lose, I think, in those situations, is that you feel like you say, that urologist or whoever it may be within your work is doing it to spite you, but actually no one sets out to be difficult. They've got their own personal, battles and things that they have to achieve as well, right?
Yeah, totally.
So how do you overcome that? Like, how can you get your head around the fact that actually they have to do what they have to do as well?
I think so. The first thing to recognize is that we are reacting emotionally, and it's the biggest empowerment you can have, but it's also the biggest problem, in that we always react emotionally. And I love Steve Peters' work when he talks about the chimp, because it's such an easily and relatable model that we all have the chimp inside us, which is strong, fast, and very reactive and responsive, but also very protective of us. And so the first response you have to the difficult person is an emotional reaction. And what you need to do is to get past that and start to think about where they are coming from, but also that they're emotional. And you can't communicate logically to someone who's in an emotional situation. I mean, the best example in the world is, has anyone on earth ever calmed down when someone has told them to calm down?
Not my wife, I'll tell you that. That doesn't work when no, exactly. And
so it takes separation, it takes a moment, it takes patience to step back and say, there is a problem in this relationship. And you also have to make an active decision that this relationship is worth saving. A couple of people asked me about bullying. How does this relate to bullying at work? And I think that's a really good question. And my response to that is, I don't think they set out to bully, but if they do, then that's a different situation, right? That's not to say this is a person that you should try and understand and empathize with. But I think a lot of bullying at times gets misunderstood because it feels like victimization when actually it's not necessarily. But put that to a side, that you need to decide, is this relationship important enough that I want to fix it? And that's the first stage. And often it isn't. And in the moment we think it is, because this is my job and I've got this person and they're a really important, they are a key person I need to work with. But the truth is, you can change jobs, you can change departments, you can move on. And if this person is so difficult for you that you feel that I can't do anything about it, then empower yourself and leave and move on. But even in the book, it's have difficult conversations with people. Say to somebody, draw a line, because I don't know if we're good enough at drawing boundaries even.
Well, I mean, especially in today's, world where everyone's got their mobile phone, there's instances all the time of people texting out of hours and just saying, oh, by the way, could you do this or could you do that? And it gets harder and harder to draw that line and go, well, no, I'm actually spending some family time now. You go, okay, yeah, I'll quickly do it now or whatever. Going to the book itself then, your first ever book, how was it writing? How was it? What were the challenges? What did you find difficult? What did you love doing?
So the first thing I think about, and I've told a couple of people this evening, is that there was a few people who said to me, "I can't believe you did it." Nick being one, and Jana being the other, who said to me that I can't believe you did it. So writing it wasn't difficult. It didn't take me long to write, but it is a culmination of 25 years of my life and my experience. So in a way, it took me 25 years and 6 months to write and to create. So it wasn't particularly difficult in that sense of the writing. I guess one of the biggest barriers was I was on a flight to Chicago with Nick in February, and he decided that was the time he needed to come and talk to me. So I was writing my book, and we had something very important to do, didn't we, Nick? So we stopped writing the book. So we stopped writing the book because we needed to do some work. But notwithstanding that, I quite enjoyed the process. And I found time when I was doing other things. I was on a train, or I would come home in the evening and I would sit upstairs for a couple of hours and just start writing. And I found that quite enjoyable.
Did you find it almost therapeutic in a way? Was it kind of like a therapy of your life where you were writing it down and, going, actually, yeah, I feel better for writing that down now?
Do you know, I did. And I think that there's parts of it that, I mean, honestly, when I read through sections of it and started writing sections of it, I was like, that's me. Right? There's a part when I talk about Elon Musk, and I'm like, that's me. And I'm sorry, Maria and Annabelle.
Hopefully, you're not quite like Elon Musk, is it?
Well, but there's an intensity about the work that he does and the way that he runs things and his expectation of how people in the business should work. And one of his expectations when he bought Twitter was, we're all going to be in the office and we're all going to work and we're all going to do this stuff. And it wasn't because he expected other people to do it, because he does it, right? He's a CEO of like 5 major companies, and he never stops work. And there's an intensity about it. And I'm certainly nowhere near that level of intensity. But as I was writing, there was a reflection of, I can empathise with that personality. And there's a couple of others in there as well that I thought, I can see that that's me. And I think that's part of the therapy, is recognising our role in being difficult. Some moments I sat there thinking about, what am I going to write here? What am I going to do? And so I'd park it and I'd go and do some research and I'd read something. Sometimes I'd go down a bit of a rabbit hole and I'd end up like reading a book about something else and going, what was I thinking about? But I'd come back to it and then get into a flow of writing. And then when you got into the flow of writing, it was so therapeutic because you're like, I'm unpicking something that's really annoying.
So you had those realization moments kind of along the way, which is nice. Has that shaped you at all? Has the book shaped you? As in, for your future business endeavors, have you thought, like you just said, you touched on something, you're like, actually, I'm a bit like Musk. Has that changed you in ways that you think, maybe I shouldn't be a bit like Musk? Have you had any of those moments?
I think that's part of the journey, is recognizing where we are a bit difficult for other people. I mean, there's people in this room who have known me for many years and will probably agree that I'm a bit difficult. Look at Horace, who was my boss at one point, and we definitely debated a lot of stuff and argued about a few things, and so I know that I am difficult, and I recognise in my career, and interesting looking back at the book and thinking about the personalities, like what was it that were the frustrations of people around me who didn't want to promote me or didn't want to push me forward, and they're in there. Those are the things that are in there. So I think there is it is self-therapeutic in that sense, and I hope that I'm a better person from reflecting and thinking about it. But the other thing is, one of the messages that I really want to give to people, and one of the missions of Foxley as a whole, and part of the message of the book, is about self-confidence. Working in sales is really lonely, and there's a physical loneliness, which is, you're out meeting customers and you're doing this on your own. So there's a physicalness where you're out of the office or you're away from your colleagues. But there's an emotional loneliness, which is an expectation that other people have. And anyone who's worked in sales has gone to a meeting with a customer, and you know that your team back in the office are relying on this deal, or really want you to close this deal, or you need to discuss pricing, you need to increase the pricing. And they're kind of all waiting for you to come back in with good news. And we've got a deal at the moment, a couple of deals at the moment that Nick and I are working on. And tonight we're waiting, we're waiting to hear what those guys did, because they went to meetings. And there's a loneliness there. And so to me, giving people confidence to succeed is the essence of what I'm about, and it's what's at the heart of why the book. Because overcoming that loneliness, and it's bad enough as it is until you're knocking on the door of a customer that you're like, and we've all got it. The phone rings and you see whose number comes up on the phone, and you have that moment of like, oh, do I want to talk to them right now? And we all have that. And so those are the moments where dealing with difficult customers really matters. And so yeah, in that sense, I hope it's making a difference.
And I mean, that's kind of touching on what my next question was anyway. But is that the main aim that you're hoping for people to get out of this book? What if you could put into, one simple term, if it's possible, that what you'd hope your readers gain from this book, what would it be?
Empathy and understanding.
Of their colleagues?
Yeah,
or in life in
colleagues, customers, managers, because it was a guy called Gary Adamson. I don't know if I name him in the book, but I remember Gary Adamson was one of my bosses, and some of the guys might know Gary Adamson. And Gary Adamson's a tough guy, right? He's a tough customer, and he's made a lot of difficult decisions. But he was the guy that said to me, for one of the first times I was like 27, he said, no one sets out to do a bad job. Mm-hmm. And we start with the benefit and doubt in mind. And when he said that to me, I'm like, if you're saying that, and he had, for me, he has a reputation, I don't know if it's true now, it was a long time ago, but at the time he had a reputation for being pretty tough and pretty forthright. And that stuck with me. No one turns up to do a bad job. And that's a big part of what this book is about, is they're not there to be difficult, they're there to be who they are. And so let's empathize with them, let's understand that, and then let's see where we go. Then we can start to see what their agenda is, and life gets a lot more straightforward then.
One of the parts of writing a book, I guess, is that you can, like you say, you can just spill what you want to put onto a piece of paper, but often you find that you write way too much.
Yeah.
So in that book, did you ever have a moment where you thought, I really want to include that in the book, but I just don't have the room for it? And if so, what was it that you left out that you wish you could have included in there?
So first of all, I don't have that problem. My problem, and when I was at school, I had this problem when they say to you, can you write an essay of 2,000 words? And I'd write what I was writing, and I'd get to like 800 words, and I've said it all.
It's to the point.
It's to the point.
Yeah, yeah.
And I guess one of the things, it's a gift, as a gift is a curse. My gift when I work with clients is often to cut through, to find the simple thing. That's often the way that I write. So I write the simple stuff. And so I have to work quite hard to pad it out. And I did some research. So when I started writing the book, I did a ChatGPT research, like how many words is a business book? And it said between 50 and 70,000 words. And I went, that's a lot. And honestly, so then as I was going, I left the word count on the bottom of the thing. And as I was writing words and words and words, I get to the end of a chapter. How many words is that? Oh, that's not enough. and I'd have to think about how I was trying to fill the book. And so and the way I'd structured it, so I did have a plan. To the people who would be surprised by that, I did have a plan. And the plan was, I'd written out the plan of like, what are the sections I want to cover? What are the chapters in those sections, and what am I going to say? What are the key messages in those? So I had a plan, and I followed through the plan. And I got to the end of it, and it was there and thereabouts around 50,000 words, which I was very pleased with. there were some other people and personalities I could have included, but I didn't want to overweight a certain section because it wants to be difficult people at work, and so that meant managers. And so then I thought to myself, what do people complain about? Well, they complain about their boss. Right? Everyone complains about their boss. They complain about colleagues, and they complain about customers. So I think there's 3 obvious sections that I want to work my way through. And then I thought, well, what are the 2 or 3 examples that I want to include? And then the problem is certain things come up more frequently. So you could maybe go difficult customers, you could get 7. And then I didn't want to overweight it with those. So those are things like some of them I had to then cut back on a certain personality type that I then excluded because I wanted to just focus on, I think it's 3 or 4 in each section. But once I'd sent the book for review, and Graham's there, and Graham was one of the key people who read the book, he came back with, first of all, some corrections. So I appreciate that you looked at that. And Joe as well. Joe Perry was also someone who spotted some errors.
You spelled elephant wrong.
Yeah. Well, and it's when people very politely say to you, so I've read through the book, I'm assuming that I don't need to pick up spelling mistakes. And I very politely said, if you could flag any, that would be helpful. Yeah. Then you're onto a winner. But they read through it and they provided some kind of feedback and said like, hey, what about this and what about that? And so I went back and I added those elements and I added some summaries and just to make the book flow. Because the other interesting thing is, of course, I wrote in my head and I understood what I was talking about. And what Graham, Joe, and a few others said when they read it was, you need more. You need to explain it more. It doesn't make sense. Or I want to know more about that topic. And by the time I went and did that, then we had a book with more content and more structure. And so we were then into the words. So I guess if there was things I left out, it was some personalities that perhaps are relevant and people worry about or think about that aren't in there.
And dare I say that could be book number 2?
I don't know. So,
are you scared off by another book, or are you?
Am I scared off by another book? I guess. So I'd say yes, but my career is filled with things that I never thought I was ever going to do, and so who knows? And I remember this when I signed for the Gap partnership, and Paul O'Donnell couldn't make it tonight, but he sent me the contract to sign for Gap, and in there was a very comprehensive non-compete clause. Right, so I signed the contract. Like, non-compete clause? Who cares? I'm never going to run my own business. Right. Hello.
Famous last words.
2018, I left and I set up my own business. So I never say never, and I always said to people, I never said, but I'm never going to write a book. Who's going to write a book? I'm not going to write a book. So my life and my career are filled with moments that I never imagined that I would go and do. So maybe there's another book. Another book on the same topic, though? Probably not. Are you going to ask me what book would I write if it wasn't a business book?
No, I'm not that predictable, but yeah, go on. Yeah, tell us now.
So then I was thinking about, because obviously you write one book and everyone talks about, well, you're going to write another book and stuff, which I think is weird, by the way. So you've written a book.
Glad I didn't ask them.
Are you going to write another one? What do you mean? I've literally just written this one.
Who'd ask that question?
Give me a chance. But so I think that if I was going to write, I'd write a romance novel.
Oh, nice.
So it is by far the biggest genre on earth.
There's a shake of the head from your wife.
Yeah. It's the biggest genre in the world.
Yeah.
So, and have you read some of them? They're awful.
Is Chris romantic?
Yeah.
That sounded convincing enough for me. Yep.
Pure fantasy.
Yeah, well, exactly. Right? Exactly.
So
my final question before we give it to you guys to ask Chris a few questions is, what is the legacy of this book? What would you like the legacy to be?
So, that's such a big question. I think the first one is that, which I think is one of the coolest things, is you send a copy to the British Library and it always exists. Yeah. So and there's a few others that send, and one of them is my son is at university in Oxford, and they've got one of those libraries in Oxford where it's you send it to the library and they keep a copy of everything that's ever been printed. That to me I think is really cool, and Rachel can tell Freya, my daughter Rachel's there, and she can tell her brother that at some point he needs to go in and the Bodleian Library and find the book that my dad wrote. Now he's studying really cool stuff with really smart, intelligent people, but even so, he can go and see my book in the Bodleian Library. So I think that's kind of cool, right? So now there's definitely a Christopher Webber who exists. Oh, and by the way,
there's always been a Christopher Webber.
Well, like because he's written a book now. Oh,
ask the urologist. He probably still thinks you exist to this day.
So there's two things. First of all, so the book is now on Amazon, as you can see, and it says other books by the same author, and there's another book by Christopher Webber, which is completely unconnected to me. But he's selling it at £90 each. Oh. So now I'm thinking, do I want to be that guy?
Yeah. Book number 2, I told you. There it is.
And it's a very specific book on the particular type of art or something. But the other one is, the first time I ever went to the US, I landed at San Francisco, and it'd been a long flight, and I get off the flight, and I go through customs, and everyone has warned me, watch out, US customs, these guys.
Brutal.
So I'm like, I need to be very serious. I've never been here before, and all this is organised. So I queue and I queue and I queue, and I get through a massive hall full of security and stuff. And I get to the guy, and so the border guard opens my passport and he looks at me, and he goes, "Hey, so you're Chris Webber? Apologies for the accent." and he goes, and I go, "Yep." And he goes, "Yeah." "You're Chris Webber." And I said, "Yes, sir." "Yep, I am." "Yeah." And then he stamps my passport and he goes, "Welcome to the USA." And so later, I ask all these other people, right? Like, this is the weirdest experience. And I only found out many years later, some of the people here might remember Mike Cummins, told me the story. So Chris Webber is a 6'8" basketball player from the US. He's black, and he's famous for being one of the most famous screw-ups in basketball history. So he apparently is one of the most successful players never to be admitted to the Hall of Fame because of the mistake that he made as a college. Because college basketball is huge, and he made a mistake in a huge final playoff game. He made a massive mistake, and everyone remembers him for that. And so this border guard was like, "Yeah." So that's the legacy that I'm trying to kill, right? So when I go to America next time, I'm hoping that the border guard goes, "You're Chris Webber. Yeah. Can you sign my copy?"
Yeah. Well, when that goes stateside, you will be the most successful Chris Webber at that point. Well, thank you very much, Chris. That was really interesting. I think a round of applause for Chris, first of all. And as I say, there's a chance now for you to ask any questions that you didn't hear there. Maria's going to walk around with a microphone for us, which is very helpful. So any questions at all? Don't be shy.
I'll ask you a question.
Thank you.
It's the same question I asked you didn't answer out there, which is, if you could have anyone in the world review your book, who would it be, and why?
So I guess there's people whose books I've read that I really like, and I'd love to know what they think, but I kind of know. So Adam Grant is a guy that comes to mind. I like his hairstyle. If anyone knows, he's also bald. And I've really enjoyed a lot of Adam Grant. I've read 2 or 3 of his books, or maybe more than 3 of his books, and I enjoy them. Now, I wouldn't expect a good review from Adam Grant because he's a researcher, and there's no research other than my experience in here and reporting. So there's less of him that he would kind of like. But I'd love someone like that to read it and for us to have a conversation, because what I'd like to think with Adam is that it would stimulate him to go, "I think this is really interesting. I'd love to talk to you a bit more about it." So that's the one that jumps to mind, is someone like an Adam Grant of the world that I've respected and has written some really interesting books and thinks about organizational design. And I'd love to have a conversation with him afterwards, what he thought.
What about Elon Musk?
I don't know if he can read.
I'll leave you
No,
to
so
decide.
I guess the answer is absolutely not with Elon Musk. Elon Musk comes up a lot, so it comes up way too many times in lots of things, and there's no doubt he builds amazing rockets. But after what he did on the weekend, I really have no time for the guy. So
there we go. Any other questions? Yes.
So thank you for the invite, Chris. So one comment and one question. The comment, I tend to disagree with your statement that you will not find a solution for your problems, that you'll be disappointed. I think you will. I mean, you haven't read the book, probably you can always relate to some of the examples in the book, and I was just telling the gentleman here that one of the things that I like from non-fictional books is when people actually did what they are talking about, not only theoretically, but actually doing it themselves, and I think that's one of the things that I enjoy the most when reading the book. So, comment aside, my question, what about being you the elephant in the room, right? How do you understand when you are the elephant in the room? Mm-hmm. Probably the sequel.
As in the other way around.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, you are talking, if you read the book, of course, you're talking about difficult people, you have different examples, etc. But what about when you are how do you identify that you are the elephant in the room? And probably you are the one that needs to go out.
You're the difficult one.
Yeah. I think there's a sense of authority that exists. So first of all, I think within an organisation, it's unlikely that a more junior person would be the elephant in the room, because I think most organisations that I've come across, Western organisations that I've come across, hierarchically are comfortable, and I think we've talked about it before, and I'm sure we've done it in conversations that we've had, where a senior person, even if they're not your line manager, would not have a problem coming after a meeting and saying, I've got some feedback for you. And in a way, that's part of the problem, is that everyone feels that they can talk to more junior people, and the reverse is not true. So that you wouldn't necessarily pull a more senior person out of a meeting and go, hey, the way you did that, I'm not so sure that's great. So I don't think so. I think it's likely that you're going to be the authority in the room. So as a customer type, in an internal type conversation. And then I think it's being aware as a leader the shadow that you cast, because you do have that authority that people won't feed back to you. And I think if you start to, if you stop hearing unhappy voices, there's an elephant in the room, because of the elements of trust within a team, understanding what's important to people and recognizing where shared value is requires some difficult conversations and some tension and some arguments. And when we stop having those, and you're a person of authority, then I think there's a problem. And so then if you go outside of that, I think it's you know. So if you know enough about customer relationships and partnerships that you know the customers who are not fully happy with the way things are, and you know enough that you could predict 6 months in advance who's the customer who's going to come to us in a few months' time and say we want to exit this deal, or we want to renegotiate terms, because there's little clues where they are not quite happy with some stuff, or the numbers are dropping back, or there's a problem with something. You can get it, and I know, Martin, we've had these conversations at times as well, and so I think we know. We just try to ignore it. And so any time that you have power and that power goes unsaid, there's likely to be an elephant in the room. And I think that's a moment to catch yourself and say, how do I lower these barriers so that we can have a really honest conversation about how I show up and what we can do differently to make it solve the problem. And I'm going to refer to Joe as well. Joe's sitting in the back of the room, and all my career playing rugby, Joe is by far the best coach I ever worked with. And one of the things that he did that stuck with my mind, I don't think it's in the book. He did a few things that were really good. One thing that stuck in my mind was we played a semi-final match, and we won pretty comfortably. But I was furious by the way we played, and and I was very childish on the field. And one of the guys who was playing had an amazing game, and he kept getting the ball, and he scored, I think, 4 tries. But he also was very destructive to the other team, and I was very pissed off because I felt like it was all about him and it wasn't about the team, and we needed to keep a structure and we needed to play the way we were playing, because they were a relatively easy opposition was not excuse to give up that structure, because we had some bigger games ahead. And so I was very childish, and at one point I cost us the ball because I refused to pick up the ball because I said, Desi, but you won't fucking pick this one up, will you, mate? And afterwards, Joe, so we won the game comfortably and we came off and we celebrated as a team. And the following weekend, we didn't have a match. And I remember well, Joe got us all into the club and he said, what we're going to do, he said, we're just going to have a team day. Because he said, we've got some problems in this team. And he said, we're going to get him all out on the open now, and we're going to talk about it and we're going to fix it. Because we've got some big games coming up and I don't want it breaking the team. And it was true Joe Smith style, which is full frontal, 100%, take it or leave it. But it was absolutely what was needed to be done on that day. And he dealt with it in the way that I would have advised in a book, in that he came to me and he said, what you did was completely inappropriate, you're an idiot, why'd you do that, what are you doing? But he also said, Desi, you didn't play to the structure, and we have spent all year building a structure in this team so that we can win big games, and we need to make sure that we keep doing what we do well. And we went on and we won the championship that year. But I think that moment was a big moment, because in the following games, so before we went out on the field, we played at Twickenham in the semi-final, and before that, me and Desi hugged, and I said to him, mate, if we win today and you score 4 tries doing what you did, I'm good. And it was interesting because I think that's what we don't do in business. We don't do enough of dealing, like calling out the elephant and going, this needs to get fixed. And so that's my kind of thought on that.
It also sounds like Man United could do with Joe as a coach right now. He sounds like exactly what they need. Sorry if there's any Man United fans in the house. Yeah, so I mean that's a really interesting point. I think also the whole flipping between junior and senior as well, because I mean even in my industry, they've got, in radio and TV, you're always picked apart after every show you do, and you know, like that whole, there's no hesitation for the boss to come forward and go, oh, you did that in that show, what would you do?
Yeah.
But there's never ever, you don't dare go to the manager, well actually if you'd done this then so it's I guess balancing out that field a little bit within both
at least you cast a shadow, and I think it's when it goes quiet. So that's my thought.
Any other questions? Yes, at the back.
So Chris, first of all, I have to applaud you for writing the book. I've met so many people in my life, I'm looking at myself in the mirror as well, with good intentions to write a book, but we've never done it. I just spoken to an erstwhile very erudite colleague sitting next to me here, and I asked him if he'd written a book, and he says he's published one, but it's not quite the same. So first and foremost, great respect to you for doing that. And having had the honour of working with you at the Gap Partnership, you were always a thought leader. You always pushed us out of our comfort zones with your thought and the way you looked at things. And I really appreciated that as well. One thing I thought about when I read the book was there is this sense that we sit in judgment of other people. Our experiences, we interpret them and we come up with solutions and we think about the motivation or why people did it. But essentially, people are quintessentially selfish. People do things for their reasons, not for mine. And I guess when you're working with a customer, they're always paid to do things for their reasons. Because they've got to work for their shareholders and maximise benefits for their shareholders, not necessarily for mine. And thank you for that, because that was a very clear thought, that came out of that. But if I were to throw that at you and say, sometimes people aren't being difficult, they are being motivated by working for their own reasons and for their own benefit rather than mine, how would you answer that?
And I think that's the powerful thought, Mary. And my advice often is, why are they doing that? Well, because they're being difficult. My answer is no, it's their job to do it. And people get annoyed. I talk about oversimplifying negotiation, right? So I run negotiation programs and conversations, and I've said this many times to many different clients, and almost nobody can argue. They try, but ultimately it comes down to it. And I say, if I'm buying a product, my answers will always be, it's not very special, I can find an alternative, and I can get it cheaper and sooner, right? And if I'm selling a product, this is the best thing that you've ever seen. You can't find anything like this, and it's incredible value for money. And it doesn't matter whether you're selling chocolate bars or nuclear weapons. It's exactly the same. Those are fundamentally the same arguments. And so when people walk into a room and a buyer says to them, you see, it's not that much better than the previous version, or it's not that much better than the products I've got from over here, it's not because they're waiting for you to prove that it is. It's because they're trying to get a better price from you. And it doesn't matter how they feel. They might come out of that meeting and go, the data that they just shared with me is unbelievably good, but my job is to get a better price. So I'm going to argue that it's a better price. And that is some of the realization that I'm trying to get people to have, Mary. It's exactly that. It's to say that they're not calling you a liar. They're not believing your information. They're not believing your data. They're just saying it because if they don't say it, they're going to pay more than they need to, and their KPI and their whole life is built upon the fact that they're going to get a better price. And if the people's insight when they come out of reading the book or reflecting on the book is that, then to me that's a big win. That's a success.
There you go. And I think that's a great way to end the chat. I know that Maria's going, right, come on, canapes now. We've got to get to the canapes. Chris, I want to say a big thank you to you tonight, because it's been fantastic. It's been a really interesting read. If you haven't read it yet, I thoroughly recommend it, and I'm not contractually obliged to say that. I do mean it. Chris has got books that you can buy out the back, and as I say, he will. That makes you sound like a dodgy dealer, actually. Out the back, that you can buy from him, cash in hand. Of course he'll sign them as well. So do make sure you do that, because it's a very worthy read. But for not the basketball Chris Webber, but the one and only Chris Webber, please give him a round of applause.
Thanks for listening to the Commercial Edge podcast. I'll be back soon with another episode. Join me then when we delve into more difficult conversations. See you next time.